Greetings, Binge Lords. This is a sponsored episode of Binge Movies. I'm here with Robert Yaniz Jr., the Iron Man of Binge Movies, the Binge Movies universe. He's a linchpin, right? He bridged the gap between myself and so much that exists in my life. Really, I'm your Spider-Man. I'm Robert Yaniz Jr.
Well, I mean, Iron Man was played by a Robert Jr., so, I mean, there's a connection there.
What in my life do I have that isn't because of you?
Well, I mean, you have, I guess, my failure to properly defend the Matrix. You have Ghostbusters in the vault because of me. So you're welcome, I guess. Does that cancel out the Saving Private Ryan erasure? Or a Rocky erasure, I guess?
No.
We're not there yet.
No,
we have to build towards something.
We have to build towards something. Now, you did a great job on Last Movie Standing. You came prepared, and we've I think everybody's done as a reasonably good job. It's not easy, and I think everybody realizes it after they're about halfway through. They're like, "Ah, shit, this is hard."
I didn't spend enough time preparing for this. Yeah.
And you did. I saw you had notes and you had arguments and counter arguments. So you did a good job. You had beat on the poll, and that's the way it works, man. You could do a really killer job. I think you did. And then the general public is like, I like this movie better. That's all it takes.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And I was pushing that boulder up the hill as hard as I could. I was like retweeting, like, anybody, let's save the Matrix. And like, all right, well, I tried.
Yeah, okay.
It's where I ended up at.
We were given this task. Somebody said, I'll give you some money, and you got to talk about Pixar movies. And I'm not a Pixar aficionado. If you've ever listened to our Pixar episodes, you're a big time hardcore Pixar nerd, and I mean that in a complimentary way. And so I thought, there's nobody better than Robert. I owe him my life anyways. And let's just do this. Let's have fun. But we're going to do it differently than we ever have before. One, we've been challenged not to swear at any point in this podcast, which is probably not going to be a problem for you because you're a good person. But I'm a degenerate. So as a degenerate,
I could either turn it on or off, and my default setting is, when I'm guesting on other people's shows, especially, is off. So yeah, I will keep it off.
I don't think I've ever heard you swear, so I just assumed that you were Mormon.
Yeah, not in the slightest.
Okay.
But yeah, I appreciate.
You're in the Tampa area though, so it's more likely you're a Scientologist. But I think Scientologists can swear.
It's true.
Yeah.
I think so. I've heard that Tom Cruise behind the scenes leaked audio from the set of Mission Impossible 7, and so it sounds like he can swear.
Looks like he's going to need to go clear again because he's an angry guy. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. You picked, I think, probably the 5 best Pixar movies, arguably. We didn't include Toy Story because we've covered 2 of them before, and there's a chance we'll cover the third and fourth one later on. So I just said, pick whatever you want Pixar-wise. That's because that was the assignment to us. That was the brief. Just not Toy Story, because we've been down that road here. And so you said, okay, let me think about it. And 2 seconds later, you're like, these 5. And I'm like, okay, well, those are like the 5. So we're going to do it. Normally, you have your list. I have mine. It goes all season, and it culminates to Last Movie Standing, which you have competed in excellently, may I add. I really appreciate that. Always appreciate your contributions. This time we're going to do something different. We're going to have to come up with one list in real time. It's not really Moneyball, because Moneyball is you pick a bunch of average to mediocre to less than mediocre players so you can get on the cheap, but combined, their stats will combine to create the effect of a super team. These are all like first class, AAA title, top of the line, gold standard Pixar movies. So it's the opposite of Moneyball. Basically, we're going to Patriot this thing, or we're going to Yankee this thing, and we're going to build our starting lineup, but we have to agree on the list. So we can do this, Robert, because we're making this up in real time on the fly. This may be the worst episode I've ever put out, and I've put out some stinkers. Or it may be really fun and something new. So we're always taking chances here.
We'll find out.
Yeah,
we'll find out. No, but to add more to the selection process, like once you asked me to do this episode, and I furiously went into a research frenzy of trying to identify what I consider the 5 best, like a compelling 5. Because what I didn't want to do is come on here and bring like 3 or 4 really great ones, and then like a Cars 2 or something like that, where it's like, because it was when I was on the 98 part 2 episode, it was very clear. We're like, well, Saving Private Ryan is number 1, and I forget, Godzilla I think was the bottom.
Yeah, that was very obvious.
It's like, well, that was too easy. Like I wanted to make this a challenge for us, and so I went through and all 5 of these won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. All 5 of these are 95% or higher on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. All huge hits, all beloved. I tried to get in different filmmakers. We only have 1 repeating here for 2 of the 5 entries. And that's how that was a very deliberate effort for me to really push us to our limit on this. And honestly, rewatching these now, it's like I could probably make an argument for why any of these is the number 1. So that's why this is going to be so tricky, because the difference in quality between them for me in some cases is so razor thin, which is why this is going to be an interesting kind of back and forth to actually find a definitive ranking for these 5.
Let's just tell the people, Robert, you tell the people what's on the list. What are we ranking today?
Okay, so I'll go in chronological order of release. We're doing Finding Nemo from 2003, The Incredibles from 2004, WALL-E from 2008, Inside Out from 2015, and Coco from 2017.
We're going to do this in any particular order you want. So if you say, let's start at what I think is mediocre, let's pick our number 3, we hash it out. Or if you want to start at the bottom, you want to start at the top, I don't care. I would say maybe keep number 1 for the end, because I think that'll be better. But otherwise, I'm going to kind of acquiesce and just kind of give a little bit of power to you and say, how do you want to do this? How do you want to tackle this? Because remember, the only rule here is, let's say we start at 5, for instance. We start at the bottom, work our way up. We can't move past 5 until we're in agreement. Mm-hmm. So we got to be. So
we're in agreement on where it places, where that proposed number 5 film places in the ranking.
We're creating one list, and we can't move on from a ranking until we've locked in that particular movie. So we could either get through this real quick, or we could be here for 8 hours. It's up to you, Robert.
You know what? I was even thinking, because I know normally when you do ranking episodes, you go chronological.
Yeah.
And I think just to mix it up, I was going to probably say, let's start with my proposed number 5, which again, if we're, I don't know if we're still doing ratings or anything for that, for this.
Nope.
But all my ratings were like between 8.5 and 9 point something.
Well, the reason why we're not doing them is the dispute here is not, are these good or not? Right. The dispute is really, what's the best? What's the best of the best? That's what we're trying to figure out. And can we agree on it? Can a Pixar, someone who's ambivalent, I don't dislike them, I'm ambivalent towards them, as somebody who really loves them, could we come up with while not swearing, a really good list and rank them appropriately, and put it at number 1. And this was supposed to be a child-friendly episode, but I picked the most boring way of doing it for children. So, there.
Sorry, kids.
Sorry, kids.
If you're listening,
you're still going to be bored.
Yeah. So I'll just start with my proposed number 5, which I'm surprising myself by saying that this is my number 5, because this at one point was probably maybe not my favorite, but like close to the top.
Yeah.
And it's still close to the top. It's number 5 out of the whatever 20 movies or whatever Pixar has made, most of which are good to great, in my opinion. But I had Finding Nemo at number 5.
Me too.
First day of school! Wake up! Come on, first day of school!
I don't want to go to school. 5 more minutes.
Not you, Dad, me!
Okay.
Get up! Time for school! Time for school!
All right, I'm up. It's time for school.
Whoa!
Nemo!
First day of school!
Nemo, don't move! Don't move! You'll never get out of there yourself. I'll do it. All right, where's the brake? You feel a brake? Sometimes you can't tell because fluid is rushing into the area. Now, any rushing fluids? Are you woozy? How many stripes do I have?
I'm fine.
Answer the stripe question.
3.
No! See, something's wrong with you. I have 1, 2, 3. That's all I have? Oh, you're okay. How's the lucky fin?
Lucky.
Let's see. Are you sure you want to go to school this year? Because there's no problem if you don't. You can wait 5 or 6 years.
Come on, Dad. It's time for school.
Forgot to brush.
Oh.
Do you want this anemone to sting you?
Yes.
Brush.
Okay, I'm done.
Up, you missed a spot.
Where?
There.
I remember when it came out in the summer of 2003, it was the huge family movie that year, I would say. And I love the setup with Marlon voiced by Albert Brooks. And I like that it goes dark right off the bat. Like all of his children are devoured by a barracuda, including his wife. Mm-hmm. And he has one egg left. And I think you need that scene to justify why this guy is so unlikable the rest of the movie. Because he is very unsympathetic. He's kind of a hard, he's kind of hard to deal with. He's kind of, I caught myself there.
You did. You're good. You're good.
And so all the, it explains, it makes a lot more sense why Dory was the character that popped, because she was actually the fun character, the one we could root for. And we understand where Marlon's coming from. And so that lends a lot of pathos to the movie, especially coming to it now now that I have 2 kids. At the time I was 20, so I couldn't really relate to having kids per se.
Yeah.
But I think that emotional thrust anchors this movie, pun intended, and pushes it through a lot of what is essentially very episodic. He meets a shark and they go through a jellyfish field and they hang out with some turtles, some surfer dude turtles, and all those characters are fun. But you could almost interchange a lot of those segments. It's very much like a beginning and an ending, bookending the story, and then in the middle a bunch of hijinks. And I feel like if we're splitting hairs and trying to rank these 5 films, all of which are great, again, I don't want any Pixar, fanatics in my mentions being like, I can't believe you put Finding Nemo at number 5. But it's like, it's a great movie. It's one of their best. This, aside from the Toy Story franchise, this is the top 5 of Pixar, in my opinion.
Right.
It just, with keeping all those different things in mind, it slipped little by little. Like, I think initially I was thinking it was probably going to be 3 or 4, and then as I rewatched it, I was like, I think this might be down to number 5. So that's where I ended up where I was. It's really funny, and I think it's got a lot of heart to it, but not as much as some of the other ones, which we'll get to. And the story isn't as tight and cohesive as I would prefer.
This is the first time I've ever seen Finding Nemo.
I saw that on Twitter when you posted it, and I was like, what? So what was that like coming to it now for the first time?
Yeah, obviously, like I have existed in the world, right? So I know what it is. There's not, like you said, there's not much story to it really when you break it down. So I knew what the story was. I knew I knew who Dory was. I knew who Marlon was. I knew who played who for the most part, and and all that sort of stuff. So I knew the characterizations and what they were, the characters and what they're going to be like. So there were no surprises. There was nothing in the movie that really surprised me, except for the fact that I didn't really care about Nemo at all. I'm a childless degenerate, so his experience meant nothing to me. I like the other characters in the fish tank at the dentist office, the Willem Dafoes and all that. Finish it! That's what I wanted him to say to Nemo, deliver us from evil! That never happens. I just kept waiting for that. I like it all, I think Jeffrey Rush is the pelican, or am I wrong about that? Which one's the pelican? Is it?
Yeah, he is.
Rush. So I liked all the characters. Nemo and every time they cut back to him and his plight, I didn't really care. And on top of that, I liked Albert Brooks's character all the way through because he is kind of a jerk, but he's coming out of a place of fear, and he's coming out of a place of trauma, which seems ridiculous to say about a clownfish. But that's right. He was traumatized. Like you said, all of his children were wiped out, and the love of his life was killed in front of him suddenly. Mm-hmm. So that would probably, and he had one little tiny damaged egg, which I guess later he fertilized, because that's how it works with fish. Not sure. But that would be a very sad fertilization process. That's what I always think is like, oh, this is sad. Single, childless Marlin fertilizing his last damaged son. Ugh. Anyway.
While he's in tears
While
doing
he's
it
in
too. He's like,
tears.
all those eggs.
Exactly.
Coral.
Nemo. He's got this gimpy little fish buddy, and it's a nice world, but I found myself drifting in and out at times because it is an odyssey. Like you said, it's a series of vignettes. Right. So it's like an odyssey, right? We got to go here, got to get back home. So it's an epic journey, and so it does follow that, like kind of like the Odyssey. It's sort of episodic, and and some of those worked better than not. The turtle stuff I thought was fantastic. The little turtle, whatever his name is, Splash or whatever his name is, Squirt, fantastic. The shark stuff didn't really do anything for me, and also I'm coming at this now knowing that Ellen DeGeneres is evil. So she was always annoying to me. Now I know she's annoying and a terrible person. And I always found her very untalented, but to know that she's untalented and terrible, I didn't find the Dory character endearing at all. It was just like, Marlon is right. He needs to ditch this insane and obnoxious person.
Well, it's also like a Memento style subplot, like with Dory too, which is strange to have in the middle of a kids movie. And on the one hand, you could read that as, oh, they wanted to have like this kind of mental health representation or whatever. But on the other hand, it's a lot of the butts of the jokes.
Exactly.
A lot of the butts of the jokes are at Dory's expense. In this movie specifically, Finding Dory, that's a whole other conversation. But
that we're not going to have.
But yeah, so no. Have you even seen Finding Dory? Like,
no.
Is this a whole brand new world to you?
All brand new world to me. Because like where I thought they were going to go with it is there's always the thing about how goldfish don't have any memory or whatever so. Right. And I thought, well, she's not a goldfish, but I thought there was going to be like that kind of a thing where she's a dumb fish basically, and then it just turns out she has brain damage, and you're like, well, that's not funny.
No, not at all.
You could have just been like, well, she's dumb, and then it would have been like, oh, okay, or that her species of fish doesn't have a good memory, but they're like, oh no, here's some scars. She's been through some stuff, but. Overall, I liked it. I think what you said about it is spot on. It has a strong beginning. It has a strong end, to the point that the end basically just flashbacks to Marlin flipping over his fin and finding the damaged egg.
A moment that always gets to me.
It got me.
Like
the
daddy's here, daddy's got you thing. Yeah. Very, very powerful little moment.
I loved Albert Brooks in this. I think he's great. I think he's like, he is annoying, but on purpose. But I think he's really funny too. And I think he's the funniest, most fleshed out, well-rounded character in the movie. And it just, in comparison to the rest of what we got, the animation isn't as stunning, doesn't hold up as well. It's kind of blocky in some instances. What they were able to do with some of the water I thought was amazing, but the actual fish and stuff, it doesn't held up. It's not that impressive. The story is threadbare. Some of the characters are annoying. I didn't care about Nemo, I cared about Marlin.
Kind of the whole point. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, not bad. It's just in comparison to the rest of these. And I thought it was a little over long. I thought it was like 15 minutes too long. This could have been a 90-minute movie, and it's it's like I think it's more.
Well, they find Nemo, and then there's the whole other set piece with the net, and with Marlin having to trust Nemo to organize all the fish to pull it down and all that stuff, which was good. But
I just wanted them to. But it's like they needed to get out of the dentist's office faster, or get to him faster. It was. Yeah.
Well, the fish gang, the fish tank gang, is in a way feels very. It feels like filler. Like you don't need it really much of that.
Yeah.
And yet in some instances, some of the best ideas and the more interesting characters are in that fish tank. Which, says a lot about Marlin and Dory's journey. If you're like, but I like Gil and I like the
starfish,
all the ragtag gang in there. Alice and Janney. Yeah, she's great in the too.
She's great. Yeah. And maybe they should have got out sooner and the two should have met in the middle or something. I don't know, but yeah. So anyway, it's definitely number 5. We're not scoring these, because they're all whatever. We're 8s, 9s, 10s, whatever. So it doesn't matter. They're all good. Finding Nemo's good. Don't get in the mentions. I like it. It's just I found myself, it didn't capture my attention all the way through. So what's your number 4?
So at number 4, I have Inside Out.
Think positive.
Okay. I'm positive you will get lost in there. That's long-term memory and endless so sworn of corridors and shelves. I read about it in the manuals.
The manuals? The manuals! You read the manuals!
Yeah,
So you know the way back to headquarters!
I guess.
You are my map. Let's go. Lead on, mind map. Show me where we're going.
Okay, only I'm too sad to walk. Just give me a few hours. Oh,
Which way? Left?
right. No, I mean go left. I said left was right, like correct.
Okay.
This actually feels kind of nice.
Okay, here we go. We'll be back to headquarters before morning. We can do it.
This is another one that I kind of thought I would have had a little bit higher, but rewatching it, like I love the ideas in this movie. I love the performances by Amy Poehler and Phyllis Smith specifically. And again, not to bring my personal life into this, being a parent of a little girl, it's both very entertaining, but also kind of heartbreaking in a way, this movie. Like there's so many ideas, and that's something that Pixar really thrives at, is visually illustrating what these kind of abstract concepts are. So what goes on in our head and how can we explain that to children? And that, so I think this movie really sort of is an examination of adolescence, about how you emotionally develop, and for a movie that's essentially about 95 minutes of watching an 11-year-old girl emotionally crumble. It's actually, it's a lot of fun at points, and there's a lot of innovation going on. There's obviously a lot of imagination goes down to all the different aspects of Riley's mind. I also feel like there are instances in this movie where the Pixar team gets a little full of themselves with their ideas. There's some aspects that feel very indulgent, like certain things are just there to be like, look, train of thought, but it's a train. Get it? I'm like, yeah, we get it. I get it. I understand the concept. Like there's so much time spent on the world building that, again, sort of like Finding Nemo. Yeah. The story is this girl is dealing with emotional stuff, and how her emotions are sort of sorting themselves out. Yeah. And that's illustrated by joy and sadness leaving because her sense of self is kind of devolving. She's moved to a new city, so she doesn't know who she is. So, all these different aspects of her personality sort of fall apart. And like most of us do at some point in our adolescence when we're trying to redefine ourselves. And I love that illustration of it. And I think it's the kind of movie that my 5-year-old didn't want to sit down with me to watch it because she thinks it scares her a little because of how real it is, I think, on some level. But then she found her way kind of in while I was watching it and sat down with me and watched like the second half of it. So I think it's a great, in a way, teaching tool for young kids to sort of understand how that everybody kind of goes through these things and sort of visualize kind of trauma and it feels like one of the only Pixar movies that's made more for parents than it is for kids, because I feel like a lot of the resonance of this will sail right over kids' heads. But it's just like certain parts of the middle just felt to me that they were, again, very meandering, kind of like Finding Nemo in a different respect, but still I give them huge props for the story that they're trying to tell and the sort of profundity behind the thesis statement of the movie, which is joy and sadness need to coexist. You need one in order to have the other. Sadness is as important as joy, and how those two fit together, because again, as a parent, your default mission is, I need to keep my kids happy. But guess what? Your kids aren't always going to be happy. They're not supposed to always be happy. Yeah. Sadness is what colors your experience with context and gives you perspective and all that stuff. And that's what this movie has to say. And I think that's great. I also don't think it has as much rewatch value as some of these other ones that we're going to get to. And I also think it's it might be more exciting to use as an educational tool or to discuss after the fact, like we're doing now at certain points, than it is to watch.
Yeah. Okay. This is not my number 4.
Okay. Here we go.
Where
did you have this?
I'm doing all of this in real time, by the way. I kind of had a rough idea of where I would put them in my head. Well, let's start with Inside Out. So I saw this. This is one I've seen. I watched it by myself in the middle of the day. It was whatever year this came out. I was like doing an end of the year catch up to watch. So I had the end of the year off, and I was like, okay, I'm going to watch like all these movies I've missed before the end of whatever year, right? So
Right.
that way I can just do the film nerd thing and be like, I've seen all the good movies, and this one had a lot of praise. So I watched it. It was this is pre-Disney Plus, so I probably rented it or whatever, and I'm watching it, and it's the middle of the day, and I'm sitting in a chair, and we get to Mr. Bing Bong or whatever his name is, and I just start sobbing.
Understandable.
Like, I don't mean crying, I mean sobbing. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me, right? I'm a crier anyways. I'm an easy cry. But less so then than now. I'm more traumatized now, so tears flow a lot easier. And back then I really, I had mild trauma. And so I would cry, but I wouldn't sob. I sobbed and I was like, oh my God. And so for a long time, I'm like, I don't want to watch this again because I don't want to feel like gutted emotionally as I'm watching it.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it again this time and I didn't tear up at all. And I didn't
Wow.
feel very much at all. And this time as I was watching it, it was at a certain point, it feels like they become more in love with their concept than the actual telling a story. And the reality is that, like, okay, the concept is really clever. We're going to create characters that represent different emotions. Disgust is not an emotion, by the way, but that's fine. But we're going to create all these different characters that represent different emotions. We're going to get the perfect people. Lewis Black's going to be anger, and all the parents are going to be like, oh, how clever. And it's real clever. And I don't mean that sarcastically. It's very clever. And this is how this world works. And we have got core memories in your childhood and other things and other emotions. Emotions affect memory and they color memory, which is like literally they color memory. And that's what makes you who you are. And it builds these foundational aspects of your personality. And then you get into adolescence and close to puberty and all that starts to change. You change, the world change, you introduce life change to a young person at a vulnerable time, and all of that's going to change. And these emotions, in particular joy, don't know how to handle it because memories are changing and life is changing and what makes this girl happy is changing. So Joy doesn't know how to do her job, right? And she's used to being in control all the time and all this sort of stuff. And but there's a point where you can anthropomorphize almost too much, where it feels as if these emotions, because they exist so independently of Riley, right? And it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It seems there's this in the middle of the movie. It feels almost disconnected, even though it's supposed to be connected. Like, oh, we push a button, we push a lever, and they keep going back to that to remind you of like, oh no, this is how this works. And then it's like at a certain point, Riley is an avatar. She's not a character anymore. Whereas the emotions are supposed to be avatars for her. They're supposed to be aspects of her. I think there's a disconnect between her and herself, right? Because ultimately, it's her sadness, it's her joy, it's her.
Yeah.
And instead, they're all just kind of like, I'll give you a great example. When we see Joy and her counterparts inside the mom, they all kind of look like the mom.
Yes.
Same with the dad, right? The dad's emotional personality complex or whatever, they all look like him. None of Riley's emotions look like her.
Well, actually, that's something that I've noticed over time too, and I did a little research, and it seems to me that the filmmakers did that, like their justification for that was, especially, she's got multiple different, she's got different genders too. She's got male and female emotions in there. I think the implication there is that Riley's a kid. Her sense of gender identity isn't necessarily stabilized. It isn't necessarily fully formed.
None of her is formed.
And that was kind of their, exactly. And so that's why the dads all look, they're all male and they all look exactly like the dad with the mustache and everything. And the mom, same thing with the glasses. Yeah, so I think it's an interesting idea.
I wasn't thinking about it in terms of gender, but that is interesting. I was thinking, because like she's like a prepubescent character, right? So she has no sexuality, right? So that makes sense. And I wasn't thinking about it in those terms. I was thinking about it more in the terms of there doesn't seem to be as a direct correlation. There's a correlation, like you said, in an almost ham-fisted way at a certain point, which is like, this is Riley's train of thought. Right? but there's not as direct of a tie to these individual emotions and this person.
Right.
And you don't pick that up the first time you watch it because it seems like, well, they do this and she's affected this way and so forth and so on. But when you really watch it, you're like, at a certain point, it feels like this is happening in like a vacuum somewhere almost. It's weird. It's weird on repeat.
It's like she's a robot that they're controlling,
Yes.
and she has no agency of her own.
Correct. And they don't seem to be influenced by the outside world. It's all inside out, but there's no outside in. And I would think that there needs to be an added complexity of if she's like the one that got me right was the hockey tryout. Because her emotions are all out of whack, she can't perform. She's not good at hockey or whatever. There's not just inside stimulus, there's outside stimulus. So something should happen in her outside world beyond just moving that also changes stuff. And one of the ways that maybe you could have done that is like something happens on the outside and then like that's where anger gets introduced, right? Or anger the emotions, they physically change.
You get a little of that up front when she's a child, like when she's, I think, she's running around as a toddler and she sees the cord, and that's when fear is like, oh, let me take over.
Yeah,
like,
right.
As it's like, but that I guess implies that her emotional state is as simple as it was when she was like 3 or 4
That's
years old.
what I mean, right?
And now she's 11 because there haven't been more characters. But then again, I don't know if this would have been better with more characters either.
What?
The only time
I
I
don't
can think
necessarily
of,
mean like more characters. I mean, take the 5 or 6 that we have. What if they physically changed as Riley changes? So their joy is like what they're doing is they change the memories, right? And so now a joyous memory becomes blue. That's the change, and that's fine. That's okay. But what if instead of that, well, now sadness is going to control more? Okay, right. But what if instead of being all sprightly, what if the emotions started to grow up with her? I guess what I'm just trying to get at is there needed to be a correlation between her interior change and exterior change, and it feels disconnected at some point. That being said,
no, that's fair.
That being said, it didn't meander in the middle. I was more along for the ride than I was the other film that I have. So I think I would put this at my number 3, and I'm going to put WALL-E at my number 4. And here's why.
Ooh, okay.
And we're going to have to come to a consensus on this, but I think WALL-E, like, if you took the first 20, 30 minutes of it, I think is like, I don't know, maybe one of the greatest animated short films ever made.
Yeah.
It's just incredible, right? The texture, I mean, this is old now, right? But the texture, the animation, this weird place somewhere between animation and reality, the incorporation of real people, but also just like it kind of looks documentary style almost in a way. It looks like it's just it as cartoony as WALL-E can be, like the world around him looks kind of very real and scary, and it's immediately. I mean, they're pulling out all the old Disney tricks, big eyes, and they're doing all this stuff that like is meant to make you go, "Ooh, I love this little thing," and it works immediately. You love WALL-E. He's just so endearing and just such a sweet personality that immediately you want to protect. You don't want anything bad to happen to WALL-E. You just want but you're sad that he's lonely. And I immediately, like, I'm on empathy overload. It was insane. Because I've never seen WALL-E either. This is the first time I saw bits and pieces of the end of it. Maybe the second half it was on TV, but I've never saw the first half. And I was sold. And his relationship with Eve or Evie or whatever, and the whole thing, and it's just wonderful. And him watching the old movies, and it's all wonderful. And I'm like, I'm in love with this thing. Then we get up to the ship, and it's fun. It's more adventure, and it just kind of becomes more of a good cartoon instead of a really heartfelt like masterpiece. And then it has, I think, a really strong ending. But this was the only one that I was tempted to fast forward through. Where I was like,
okay.
let's just get past it. I understand these people are fat. I understand they don't do anything for themselves. I understand that they're slobs. I understand all of this. I understand. I get it. I get the joke. They're fat. I get it. They're lazy.
But do you
They're
get
stupid?
Do you get that by and large is essentially Walmart?
Yes, I get it. Corporation's bad. I get
okay,
it.
making sure.
Have you listened to this show?
It's also basically what I like, because it's the interesting thing is I had Wally at number 3, so now we're just flip flopping. We're trying to argue 3 and 4 back and forth. I like that it's.
There was a while here, Robert, where I would have like there's a good first 30 minutes of Wally.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, this might be my number 1.
Yeah.
But so it just, as it went on, I was like, whoop. It just dropped.
I agree with you. It loses momentum when it leaves Earth, and then it regains it once the story becomes more focused. Because, and this is where we're really identifying a big Act 2 problem that Pixar has. They have these big ideas, they establish them up front, they resolve them really well.
Super clever.
And then in the middle, there's just, excellent. Yeah. The fact that this is a little robot, or I guess 2 little robots, who teach humans how to be human again.
Yeah.
Basically, it teach people how to rediscover their humanity, take their literal first steps, because none of these people walk around. They just like go on these little automated chairs back and forth, drinking their meals. And I love the creativity behind a Walmart style corporation who of course would fund these ships, and everything is automated. Just hang out this, while we fix up Earth. And of course Earth was beyond repair. I like the commentary on environmentalism and how we basically destroyed the planet on our own, and then got so comfortable wandering around the stars that 700 years went by, and we were like, oh yeah, we forgot to check. Is Earth done? What's going on?
Yeah.
Oh, is it habitable again? So I love all of that. I do agree with you. There's a middle section where it's just like chase sequences and a lot of stuff, that some of which is more rewarding than others. I still think the dance sequence with Wally and Eve is gorgeous. And I think Thomas Newman did the score here.
Yeah.
It sounds to me what I imagine space would sound like, in the way that his score for Finding Nemo sounds like the ocean to me, with this kind of drifting melody.
But that almost feels again like it feels like they made 3 shorts, the end, the middle, the beginning, right? And each of those 3 shorts is phenomenal. But there's something between the first short and the second one, and between the second one and the third one, it's just meandering, and it's just 1990s cartoon. It just feels like a cartoon. It just feels like a Don Bluth and like Anastasia or something. It feels like a second tier kind of a thing, and it's almost like the movie's almost too good to sustain how good it is.
Yeah,
because it's art,
I agree with
art,
that.
and that's the thing. It's like, this is an artistic expression, because your 2 main characters can't say more than their really 1 or 2 words, each other's names. Right. That's it, right? And they're all
directive.
Yeah,
directive. It's just directive is their main mode of communication.
Yeah.
Directive ? Directive period.
Right.
And that's like, I love I love all of that, and the fact that the first 30 minutes plays mostly like a silent film.
Yeah.
And I love the contrast between this post-apocalyptic Earth, these robots with emotions, and footage of Hello Dolly and La Vie en Rose, and like this kind of clash of old school Hollywood like romanticism and yet post-apocalyptic wasteland. Like, I love all of that.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. The blending of sort of live action sort of devolving into animation, as we see at one point the captains looking at the pictures of the other captains, and it transitions. Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting idea. But a lot of the stuff happening on the ship, I agree, it is kind of all over the place, and it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like it's killing time. So I don't know. See,
here's where we have the struggle. Both these movies are good, but they both have the same problem.
Yes. Great ideas.
Yeah.
Subpar execution at times, kind of
in the middle
acts. Yeah.
So
this is tricky.
Okay.
So I think it sounds like you prioritized Inside Out because the ideas in there are more distinctive or more original and feel fresher than Wall-E. Is that kind of what broke it down for you?
Yeah, I think okay. This is where it's a toss up because I think Wall-E's a better looking movie. I think it's the animation style. I think that it's some of the most evocative. I would say it is the most evocative imagery in any of the movies that we watch, outside of maybe Coco. And somehow they made in a post-apocalyptic world like extraordinarily visually interesting, in its blandness, in its sameness, in its blandness, in its disrepair, and that's very hard to do. I think they had a slightly bigger hurdle, which is they have a character that is a robot that's basically discount Johnny Five, and we somehow have to make him his own distinct thing, and they do it. They completely stole what made Johnny Five so endearing, though, which was the eye movement.
100%. I had that in my notes. Yeah,
they figured that out. They watched that movie and were like, what makes that robot so cute is not the annoying commercial references. It's his eye movements. It's eye flutters and stuff. And it's the Jim Henson effect. It makes them more human. So old school Walt Disney, right? It makes big eyes, fluttering eyelids. It brings empathy out of you. So
he even gets a little animal sidekick. It just happens to be a cockroach.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is really funny too. But then you spend all that time with him scavenging for like interesting things on Earth. Like he spent so much time on Earth that he's developed more human emotion than the humans.
Yeah.
Which I think that's so cool. That he finds all these different things. He's a little, like, I guess, air quotes, artifacts of what Earth. He finds a spork and he doesn't know where to put it between the spoon and the fork.
Yeah.
He picks up the little trash can lid and is dancing with it. So I love all of that. But it's, I don't know. It drops off somewhat in the middle and then comes back.
I think the drop.
I feel like
I think the drop off for me. The drop off is steeper because I think it starts way stronger than Inside Out does. Inside Out is very charming. It's like very warm. It's very like
more consistent, I think, for you.
Yeah, it's more mild. You know, it's more. It's just like pleasant. Even the music, it's like a pleasant bath. But Wall-E, there's a darkness to it. There's a heaviness. It feels more mature and childish at the same time in a way.
Right.
I don't know what plays better for actual children. I'm not sure. I don't know if Wall-E's better because it's just robots. I don't know.
I have two nephews and both of them feel like they're watching Wall-E constantly. I feel like Wall-E has more replay value for kids,
which is weird because,
like I said, I think
it's got some dark stuff.
It's a weird movie.
It's weird. Weird, yeah.
But Inside Out is heavier, but I don't think kids see that. That's like I was saying.
Yet. I think as kids grow up and then look back on it, they're going to be like, "Oh my god!" Right? We'll be getting those.
So Inside Out would
we'll be getting those tweets in five
better.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Inside Out would probably hold up better for people that grew up with both of these movies.
Yes.
When they get older and they go back and they're like, "Oh man, look at that! I didn't even understand like the relevance of, exactly what Riley's story is, and it didn't hit me emotionally the same." Because I get a little. I'm also very emotional. I also cry very easily, especially the last few years.
Yeah.
Finding Nemo, I have my moments where I get touched in. Wall-E, I have moments, especially like the end. It's really sweet and romantic when they, Wall-E's memory comes back. You think for a moment that he lost he lost that connection with Eve, and then now the whole first act, he's like following her around, like totally smitten with her, and then in the end, like she sort of flips. Because he's bent over backwards to help her with her mission and getting the plant to the ship and all that.
She's mean to him.
Then she's very
mean to
she's being robotic. Like it's her interaction with him. She's programmed for something, and her interaction with him makes her develop more emotion and more like connection and all that, which is beautiful. And I love that aspect of it. But in Inside Out, there's like 2/3 of the movie where I'm like low grade emotional, like consistently, like with the things that are happening, with the things that Riley's going through, her breaking down in class, is really sad to me. The things that are going on with joy and sadness, and how sadness has to kind of take over, and her losing her lost. You see that there's that dump with all the old memories.
Yeah.
Like when she's a child and all that stuff. All of that stuff is really powerful. I think I gave Wall-E the edge because of that, mostly because of that first act, and because it feels in a way like the most avant-garde thing that Pixar's ever produced.
Yep.
And I think that's why I gave it the slight edge.
You know what? As I've talked it through, and
but
as
it's
I'm
close.
hearing you talk it through, because here's the other thing. The dip, I think, is steeper in Wall-E, but I find sadness to be very annoying. Like, I don't find it funny. I don't find it, like, I understand thematically the point of it. I just don't find her funny. And the self-loathing, all of that, it's like, okay, this is...
Well, I like when Joy is like, come on, be positive. And she's like, I'm positive. We're not going to make it out of here.
There's
or
a
whatever.
few...
She's like, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, there's a few that are funny,
but I
but
get you.
it's just so redundant. I find myself as frustrated by that character as Amy Poehler's Joy does, who I think, by the way, let me just say, Amy Poehler, I think, is just amazing in this. Her voice acting is just phenomenal. It's like some of the best stuff she's ever done. I'm an Amy Poehler fan, but she doesn't play it too broad. She doesn't play it. There's a way that you could do it where it's like, I'm Joy and I'm a cartoon. Ah! Like, she's not like that.
Yeah.
She got it. She seems more human in a way.
Yeah, she's like a frustrated manager too at various points. She's just like, oh, come on, you could do it here. This is the circle of sadness. You stay here.
Yeah,
and,
she's got to stay positive.
Just stay out of it.
Yeah, she's got to stay positive, even though she's frustrated. Yeah. Like, come on, exactly. Hey, everybody. But
then she develops, like that moment I mentioned with the lost memories. She develops kind of sadness at varying points of the movie as well. Yep. So. Yeah, no, I understand that point about sadness. So go ahead, back to your.
So you had Inside Out at 4, and I had Wall-E at 4.
Right.
I will make that trade with you. And honestly, anytime it gets weird and soulful and artsy, it's just amazing. And anytime it just goes standard animation, it just drops down. But I will bump it up, and I will trade you your Wall-E for your Inside Out. And we'll say number 4 is Inside Out. Can we live with that?
I'm good with that. I should also point out that Finding Nemo and Wall-E, both Andrew Stanton directed.
Yes.
So that was the filmmaker that we had on here twice.
Yeah. And he also went on to direct John Carter.
He did, which I have not seen, but I've heard some people be like, it's not as bad as they say. So
Kevin Brackett loves it. It's on Disney Plus. It's 5 hours of your life that you'll.
That's why I haven't watched it. It's like 2.5 hours, and I'm like, I don't know, for like an okay movie. And that's the funny thing too, because Brad Bird, the filmmaker who we're going to get to shortly, it did Tomorrowland, another expensive Disney live action movie that went nowhere that no one saw.
So that means at number 3 you had Wall-E.
That's what I had. Yeah, it was a nice flip flop there of.
Okay,
those two.
I can live with that. I can live with 4 Inside Out and 3 Wall-E. Now we're getting down to brass tacks, buddy. Number 2 and number 1. Right. I will tell you that I surprised myself here. So,
ooh, interesting.
What do you got as your number 2?
At number 2, I had Coco.
Me too. Wow, how anticlimactic.
You're always this nervous before a performance?
I don't know. I've never performed before.
What? You said you were a musician.
I am. I mean, I will be once I win.
That's your plan? No. You have to win, Miguel. Your life literally depends on you winning. And you've never done this before. I'll go up.
No, I need to do this.
Why?
If I can't go out there and play one song, how can I call myself a musician?
What does that matter?
Because I don't just want to get De La Cruz's blessing. I need to prove that I'm worthy of it.
Oh, that's such a sweet sentiment. That's such a bad time. Okay. You want to perform? Then you got to perform. First, you have to loosen up. Shake off those nerves. Now, give me your best grito.
My best grito?
Come on, yell. Belt it out. Feels good. Okay, now you.
die.
Oh, come on, kid.
I had before I started rewatching these. I was like, all right, so probably 5 will probably be Inside Out, then maybe Finding Nemo, then Coco, and then I rewatched. I'm like, yeah, no, Coco's second. Coco's
I
moving
thought
up and
Coco would have been
pushing
number
on.
1 for me.
Yeah, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I saw this in theaters. Now I had the weirdest experience, Robert, seeing this in theaters. So
Okay, tell me about it.
I go to the theater and I'm like, and this, if you remember, this movie made like all the money.
Mm-hmm.
It was like sold out theaters. Like this is like, it was crazy how much this was extremely popular. Soundtrack, all of it. And I'm like, okay, everybody's raving about Coco. All the film snobs on Film Twitter love Coco. Everybody who's ordinary and just enjoys life and movies, they like Coco. So that tells me it has to be good, right? If the film weirdos and the normies all like it, then it has to be pretty good. This isn't a Greatest Showman situation. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna wait and I think it came out around the holidays, didn't it? Wasn't this a Christmas release or a holiday release?
Yeah, because it also had the 4-hour Frozen thing at the beginning of it. That this is one of those movies that I went to see it. I was like, oh boy, checking bored as hell during the Frozen thing. I think it was Frozen Fever or whatever, but it's
Right.
25 minutes long. And then I came out and I told my wife, because I saw it by myself, I was like, you need to go see this movie. Because our daughter was, too little to really go see that at this point. So my wife went by herself. I hung out with our daughter, who at that point was, I guess, less than a year old.
Yeah.
And I told her just, get there late, miss the Frozen thing. And she loved it as well. So it was one of those movies everyone was talking
So
about.
I never saw the Frozen thing because they stopped it after a while. Remember, they were like, there was so much negativity.
Because people complain.
Yeah,
They're
they
like,
got rid of it, right?
Like, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah. And so I go and I see it, and we have Cinemark around here, and so I had an XD theater, which is their FOMAX, basically. It's their, when you go to AMC and you go to IMAX or some of these other places that say IMAX, it's not an actual IMAX theater. It's a makeshift version of it. So that's why film snobs call it FOMAX. I don't know that you'd want to watch a lot of these movies in actual IMAX. If you've ever been in an actual IMAX theater, I think you'd puke if you watch like a Transformers movie.
They used to, and here in Tampa, Florida, they used to have at the Museum of Science and Industry, they used to have a dome theater, the IMAX dome theater.
That's true.
And
IMAX.
there I saw, that was amazing.
Yeah.
That I saw back in the day in the 2000s. I saw some Star Wars. I saw some Matrix. I saw the Dark Knight.
Wow.
I saw,
That's true.
Interstellar.
IMAX.
I saw Ghost Protocol, I think, there.
Holy moly.
And those were amazing movies to see in IMAX.
Yeah.
Now every time I go to AMC IMAX, I'm like,
It's IMAX aspect ratio and some IMAX technology, but it's not an IMAX theater. That's a market.
I'm a Dolby guy. I would prefer Dolby. I'd rather have the sound than the IMAX ratio. But that's neither here nor there.
Okay, so Cinemark has XD, which is neither Dolby nor IMAX. It's their own thing. Basically, it's just very loud and very big. And so I saw that because that's like what it was playing in, because the biggest releases usually go there. And I was there, and I'm in my leather recliner, heated seat, big, aisle and everything. And I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting, you reserve seats. So I'm sitting smack dab in the middle. And it's like maybe a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I went after I knew the Pixar or the Frozen thing wasn't going to be attached. And when kids went back to school, and I went to a 3-4 p.m. showing, something like that. And not a soul showed up. It was me in a giant, huge XD stadium theater in the perfect middle center in front of a giant screen, utterly by myself. And it was one of the most surreal experiences as I'm crying watching a cartoon by myself. And the ushers kept coming in. I think they were wondering if maybe they could clean the theater again, but there was just one dude in a hoodie sitting there crying. They're like, God, all these teenagers were judging me. And I was kind of worried. I'm like, okay, if I watch this at home, I'm like, I had such a surreal experience with it. Will it diminish to me? Because it was just I loved it. I loved everything about it. I love the colors. I love the textures. I love that it almost has a stop motion kind of quality to it. It looks like the character designs, they almost look like, stop motiony. They almost look like a Coraline or Kubo, just a little bit. They still got that Pixar sheen to them, but their heads are a little bobbly, especially the skeletons. And there's
there's that one moment where Miguel is like doing Miguel is like doing the walk.
Yeah.
And Hector's like, that's not how we walk. He's like, that's how you walk. And he's doing like that. Yeah, totally. I love all of the characters.
There's something kind of distinct about the way the characters look versus their world, or where they pop a little bit. At times it feels like really like 3D, but it's not, you know? And so it's just really, really so colorful and interesting, and they're sparse on the songs, thank God, because I'm not a musical guy. But when the songs kick in, they're so charming, and you just want to move and you want to dance, and it's a whole. There's the whole cultural representation aspect of it, and I don't know to the degree of accuracy. Obviously, it's fantasy, but and they're probably taking liberties. But there's just so much, and and the other thing is, it's a fun adventure movie. Like there was never a point in the movie where I was like, I don't know, you know.
Yeah, no. The ideas here are thematic, not necessarily as conceptual. You know, the ideas are
it's not as deep.
Tradition.
Yeah.
It's more. Yeah, the themes. What it's trying to say is simple. It's simpler, and it's so. I think it's therefore it's easier for the film to kind of get its hands around what it's trying to say. Which here are, you know, it's tradition, it's legacy, it's kind of that conflict that all of us creative people face at one point or another to varying degrees. Like, how much of my life do I want to devote to my passion, to my art, to my creativity, versus family, and kind of that, you know, that sort of juxtaposition, you know, where we have the character of Hector who left to pursue his music, and then it's kind of affected the entire shape of this family and the way that they operate, and sort of leading Miguel to live in this kind of Footloose-esque no music lifestyle with his family. But like, so
Mama Coco's face, I think, the amount of texture,
God,
it's like she's animated almost in a completely different style. She looks like somebody made her out of almost like clay. But I mean I don't mean that like in a she looks rudimentary. I mean she looks hand sculpted. Her face looks hand sculpted. The level of detail.
The detail on the wrinkles.
It's like holy moly,
amazing. From a design standpoint, outstanding across the board. Like culturally and, you know, as far as representation, from what I understand, there was a lot of research that they did into this. They brought people in to sort of explain to them what this culture is like and what Dia de los Muertos is all about, and sort of represent that as accurately as they can in a movie that's meant for everyone and not necessarily to isolate everybody. But I think that's something that, as much as a lot of us take issue with Disney and the business side of it, and like the mouse kind of taking over Hollywood and all this other stuff, from a creative standpoint, they do put things out like this, or Moana, where they're actually trying to do something good with representation and you know, having some diversity, not all white leads, white male leads, especially back in the 90s. You had Pocahontas. Everyone else was from some country in Europe, pretty much, or was an animal, was an African animal, all voiced by almost an all white cast. So getting actual Latinx people to voice these Mexican characters, you know, you got to give them props for that, and representing this culture, and doing so in the form of what is the closest Pixar has ever made to a musical, certainly. I think it helps that the performances in here, because my wife's not you know, she doesn't really like musicals either, but it helps that the musical performances in this movie are performed by the characters in the movie. It's not just Miguel walking by and be like, I wish my family would let me play music. You know, he's not singing. He's not singing about his life. He's singing because that's how he expresses himself. And so even that feels like it's more palatable to even people like you, Jason, who don't really care for musicals. So I love this movie, and it hits. This is the one that I was basically like, there are moments that it hits me emotionally, but there are at least two moments where I watched this, I kind of, to make sure this was fresh in my head, because it's the most recent of the selections that we're talking about, and therefore the one I've seen the least. I actually finished watching this morning, so I started my day with like some nice ugly crying before I jumped on the mic here. because those two versions of Remember
Oh
Me
my God, that's what I
that
was about
involve
to say.
Coco.
Yep.
The one with Hector, the flashback with Hector and little Coco, and then at the end with Miguel and
Yeah.
Coco, this 90-something-year-old woman whose mind is going
Yep.
where he's singing in a last-ditch effort to get her to remember her father because he's about to fade away from existence and not even exist as a spirit. And the whole thrust of Hector's character wanting to just see his daughter one last time, like I'm gonna get emotional talking about
Yep.
it. Like it's by far, like if we were ranking these based on which one can make anybody cry,
Oh, it's
which one is
Coco.
the most emotional,
Yeah, it's Coco.
it's this
Yeah.
easily
Easy.
over the movie where most of the characters are actual emotions. It's this one. Then Inside Out maybe has the most emotional.
And
I don't
it's
know.
genuine, right? It's not just
100%.
like schmaltzy manipulation to get you to cry. It is genuine because the movie gets you to care about these characters. And it is a movie about grief. It's a movie about culture. It's a movie about ancestry. It's a movie about family, like family honor, tradition, family trauma, family secrets, misunderstandings, all this sort of stuff. Ultimately, it is a movie about grief. And we all have people in our life, grandparents, parents, siblings, uncles, aunt, whoever, that we love that are not with us anymore. And it's like, I also choked up this time at the end with they're having the celebration, and the spirits are back and they're joining them, and they're not aware that the spirits are there, or they're kind of aware, but they can't see them, right? And I was just sort of like, that idea of like, the people you love being with you even after death is just, oof. Yeah,
Right.
I'm getting choked up.
Yeah.
They take Remember Me, which is a great song, period. Great song. But on its own, it's just a great song. They take it and they play it like 6 times in the movie. And you think, okay, that's redundant. But each time they play it, it's like with a slightly different mood. And it represents something different. And the way it transforms from being like, oh, that's just a catchy tune.
Yeah, Ernesto de la Cruz at the beginning, like this bombastic, like, look at how great I am, like we could contain entertainer with the yeah, exactly.
And it's a great song. You're like, oh, that's catchy, and this guy's handsome, and he's cool, and it's like a love song. He's like a matinee idol, right? He literally was a matinee idol in Mexican films, and he's just like singing to the women of the world, like I have to leave to go to my next adventure. Remember me, right? But it's still catchy.
Yes.
You're like, man, that's really catchy. It's got a great melody, all this sort of stuff. And then you flip over to, oh no, it was complete spoilers, but I guess we're going to do it. No, he has stolen this music. That there's nothing. He murdered his best friend and stole a song he wrote for his baby daughter.
Yes.
So that to comfort her and himself when they're away from each other, when he's trying to get a musical career, to support her. And then he decides, I can't do it. I love my daughter too much and my wife. I'm going home. And he's murdered. And this guy's hit music is stolen. And you realize what the real context of Remember Me is. And then, of course, when Miguel plays it at the end, and she starts singing, right? She comes out of her fog because it triggers a memory in her. And Mama Coco starts singing with him. You're like, oh, if you don't cry at that, there's something wrong
litmus
with
test
you.
for humanity.
Yeah.
Like
You are a replicant.
This doesn't move you emotionally. To some degree, like I don't know what to tell you.
Also, Miguel is a child actor playing a child character, and he is so likable and lovable as a character. That
I had that written down too. Like,
and you understand where he's coming from when he does kind of some shitty stuff that he does in the movie or whatever, or he reacts like a child would react in this high concept fantasy, right? But you're never you're like, oh, you see how at times how short sighted he is, but it never feels this selfish kid. He's a hurt kid who has something he really loves in his life that he doesn't understand why his family is on either side of the grave is trying to take it from him. And especially in his mind, it's not that he wants to dishonor his family. In his mind, this is how he connects with his family. And so it's like how,
and that becomes
Yeah.
and that becomes that's in the celebration scene that you're mentioning at the end of the movie when he sings "Proud Corazon."
Yeah.
Like that's the whole.
Yep.
That's where the whole movie is: pursue your art or be a part of your family. And that's Miguel's kind of resolution is, all right, no, I just bring my family into my art and bring my, marry those two worlds.
Yeah.
And to your point, like it's supposed to be what, 10 years old, 12, something around there, somewhere in that range. And all he wants to do is play music in the town square.
That's it.
We just talked about a movie where an 11-year-old girl was running away from home to her old house, like presumably states away. It's like all this kid wants to do is I just want to stand on that stage and play a song for the people in my neighborhood, and he's being denied that. Yeah. And when you're that age, everything is the end of the world. I have a 5-year-old in this house. We tell her she can't have the thing for lunch she wants, she throws a fit. So of course a 10-year-old is like, this is the end of the world. This is all I have. You see him, he puts Ernesto de la Cruz on such a pedestal. Yeah. You see him watching the movies, which as I recall was the teaser trailer, I think, for this movie was that sequence with him watching the little clips of Ernesto de la Cruz. And usually Pixar teaser trailers are not that great. They have a tendency to just kind of be subpar, and then the movie ends up being much better, in my opinion.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times they're just too jokey, and they're playing to kids. And I feel like this one kind of hinted at the deeper meaning that was going on in this movie from the get-go. But yeah, it has a whole appearances can be deceiving thing too, with Ernesto de la Cruz, turning out to be the villain, with Hector's intentions getting misread. There's a lot, like we were saying, a lot of misunderstandings and things like that. Yeah. Did the twist that Hector is his real family, did that work for you, or did you kind of?
I thought it was
because when I saw this the first
obvious.
time, yes, okay.
Yeah.
Me too. But this movie even transcends that.
It does.
Even transcends where you're like, oh, well, clearly this guy's going to be the character that we're spending the whole movie with, probably his real great-great-great-grandfather, and not this guy that he thinks is, Yeah,
it's not going to be the movie star. It's going to be this other guy.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. And it works. And it doesn't really take anything away from the movie. I think that's a testament to the strength of the storytelling around it.
Part of the reason it works for me is because until the very, very end, in the middle, and De La Cruz realizes, oh, you're not my great-great-grandson or whatever, he's not really, I feel like when he apologizes to Miguel and he's like, I'm sorry, like, you can't go home, you're staying here, like, whatever. Like, I feel like he actually likes the kid. I think he really likes Miguel. I think the villain, up to that point, like, really genuinely likes him. It's just like he likes his reputation more. Like he's turned on Hector. He hates Hector, but he's like, I'm gonna keep you here in the land of the dead because I need the living to keep giving me these offerings because he wants to be wealthy in the land of the dead, right? Like he wants to keep his status, but he doesn't hate the kid. So at like the very end when he's like trying to kill the kid and stuff like that, it does go a little bit like 90s Disney villain kind of at the end with him.
Right.
And I'm like, I liked it better when he was like a little bit more complex than that, right? Like he's the bad guy without a doubt, but he's not without the capacity to care or like somebody, right? Like I thought that was more interesting. So
and it's I think it's also go ahead.
I think the ending resolution, like I love them, Hector and his great-great-grandma singing together, and I love all that sort of stuff, but I think like the resolution of him just like being taken by the cat and thrown into a church and the bell, that all felt very 90s Disney. And it's
no, I agree.
They always fall off of something high in those movies, or it's just like it's almost, and I know this is Pixar, but it's like a classic Disney trope since like Snow White or whatever. Somebody's falling off a cliff, somebody's falling off a church, somebody's falling off a building. And also he's dead, so how do you kill him? You can't.
Right.
The only thing that can happen is that he'll be forgotten. But also, like, I like how they did it. It kind of made sense. Mama Coco kept all the letters. They're all dated and timed and whatever. And so that little town can be like, this guy that we all worshipped as like this, our movie star or music star. It's not him. It's this other guy. for a fact there's still be a lot of people that would still be like, nah, it was De La Cruz. They're trying to take his legacy, right? Like there would not all of a sudden
Hashtag fake news.
Yeah. There's no way that like everybody in the world that's of Coco that's in love with this guy would suddenly like hate him. That just wouldn't happen. So
would it have worked better if the family knew the truth and everyone else was just like whatever? Kept on thinking De La Cruz was the one behind it. Was that so? It was a little too convenient of a narrative cleanup for you, is what it sounds like.
It's an extraordinarily happy ending, and I'm swept along with the emotion of it. But I don't. That's the part where I'm like, I bump up against it. I'm like, this guy's been famous. He's been dead for 60 years or 70 years. And he's been like the fact that he's even still popular is kind of weird, right? Because like you could be a superstar and 20 years later nobody knows who you are. So that's kind of weird.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'll believe that. But then to believe that then they're going to be like, if like all of a sudden we found out that Elvis wasn't really Elvis, like somebody else was singing all those parts or whatever, would anybody care in 2021? And the people who do care about Elvis wouldn't believe it, right? So
that's true.
And then he's basically Mexican Elvis, and so I was like, oh, okay,
kind of.
Yeah.
To be fair, too, though, we don't know exactly when this movie is set. It has a certain timelessness to it. And there's no,
I don't know.
There's no
Miguel's
technology
wearing jeans
in
and
it
a
or
hoodie.
anything.
Miguel's wearing jeans.
I guess.
Everybody else,
technically.
you're right though. Everybody else is wearing like generic clothes, like even in the living world, like his family and stuff. They're just dressed like people that could have been at any time, pretty much, right? But Miguel definitely looks like a kid from right now.
Yeah. All right. Fair.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. I'm with you though. Why is this number 2 and not number 1 though? Well, we got to answer that question.
I think for some of the things that we've addressed, I think the thing with the spirit animals felt very shoehorned in. Like I didn't need the dog to be a spirit animal. I felt like that was again kind of a 90s. Like we need an animal sidekick that can help Miguel out. Yeah. I'm like, do we though? I mean, we don't really.
And he doesn't really
there's
do
a couple
much.
instances.
Yeah, it doesn't really.
No, he doesn't. He shows up to catch Miguel briefly, and then
drops him.
And then the giant cat gets him anyway. Dante, you had one job. There's that. There's, I think, certain element like the twist. I feel like we said, was a little predictable, as you said. Like we know that it's clearly not going to be De La Cruz pretty early on. You can kind of put those pieces together. I don't think the movie suffers for it, but I think that my number 1, it just feels, I don't know, it's just more rewatchable for me. I feel like it has like, when we get to it, I can't think of much negative to say about it. This one, I have a couple minor things and that's about it. So if we were rating these, this would still be like 9.3 or 5 or something like around there.
It's a lovely film. It's a lovely film.
It's beautiful. The design of the world and the way it's illustrated with all the culturally
attention.
Culturally appropriate like design and colors and the leaves, the like bridge of leaves that he travels over to get to the land of the dead. All that stuff is gorgeous. And I mean, for all the reasons we mentioned, it's by far one of their best. Their second best, I guess we're agreeing on. And it also feels like, Pixar's been on a little bit of a downswing in a lot of ways, because of the last 3 that they've made, I think Luca's the only one I really have any interest in rewatching. And it feels like this is sort of a level of filmmaking that they haven't made anything. Let's put it this way. They haven't made anything close to these 5 films since this movie.
Yeah.
Like this is the bar that now has been set. This and Inside Out was a couple years before, like we said. Other than that, they put out The Good Dinosaur, which is not very good. Finding Dory, which is fine. Onward, which is okay. Like a lot of movies that are like good but not great. And these 5 are great. And I think Coco in another world, you talk to me another day, this could have been my number 1. I don't know. It's again a razor thin edge for these movies. But the number 1 that I have, and I guess we both have, is kind of undeniable in my mind, at least.
Well, it's obvious. Our number 1 is The Incredibles, and this is my first time watching this one as well.
Oh, interesting.
Can break through walls. I just can't.
That's fine.
Get this.
So, Mr. Incredible, do you have a secret identity?
Every superhero has a secret identity. I don't know a single one who doesn't. Who wants the pressure of being super all the time?
Of course I have a secret identity. Can you see me in this at the supermarket? Come on. Who'd want to go shopping as Elastigirl, you know what I mean?
Super ladies, they're always trying to tell you their secret identity. Think it'll strengthen the relationship or something like that. I said, girl, I don't want to know about your mild-mannered alter ego or anything like that. I mean, you tell me you're a super, mega, ultra lightning babe, that's all right with me. I'm good. I'm good.
And again, it's one of those things where it's not that complicated of a story. It is relatively simple. The best thing this movie does straight off the gate is they don't try. There's no twist. They don't try to be like, oh, it turns out the villain is the kid from the beginning. It's the kid looks like a villain when he's a kid, and it's obviously he's the villain. And the movie is like,
I'm the villain. And when the first time we formally meet his adult self, he just drops that out there, like, oh, by the way,
yeah.
I tried to be your friend.
Yeah.
And it didn't really work out.
Yeah, they don't
Let's
even
move
try
on.
to fake you out, right? Like they know. They're like, oh, we're not even going to try to go for that. This, and I've heard so many people talk about. So there's so much hype about this movie for so many years, and it was like, I kind of get it. I saw the end of it. Like, I've seen chunks of it on TV, flipping through the channels. So like, do I really need to revisit it? This gave me the occasion to revisit it. Well, the animation style, it's a completely different animation style. It's got that sort of Art Deco, sharp edges, kind of.
Well, it seems like it's set in like in essentially the late 60s, because when Edna mentions all these superheroes, like this person, 1956, this person, 58, and like superheroes have been outlawed for 10 or 15 years. So we're like in the late 60s, the space race time, basically, is where we're at.
Yeah. Even though his office seems really modern.
It does.
Yeah. But yeah, it's in some weird time, and it's obviously not our world, right? So it doesn't really matter. It's a world full of superheroes. The fact that they're able to do what they do, the fact that they created a superhero world in the early 2000s, long before the MCU, right? What year did this come out? 05, 06?
2004. So yeah, this was
4 years before Iron Man. So at this point, we're getting X-Men movies.
Daredevil is the year before this, and then Fantastic Four, the original, to the Chris Evans one or whatever, is the year after. So yeah.
So you could have said from 2004 to maybe 2005 and maybe 2004 to 2008, this is the greatest superhero movie of the decade at that point, right? They're taking superheroes, they're doing clever things with them. It's deconstruction without dismantling. They're playing on riffs. All of these characters are analogous to something else or somebody else, right? This thing kept my attention, and it is maybe a perfect film. Story-wise, narrative-wise, character-wise, characterization, acting-wise. There's no redundancies. There's no stupid twists. There's no stupid references. The humor is character-based humor, so it has not aged or dated at all. It still looks, some of the animation in this looks amazing. Some of the jungle sequence stuff, I was like, my God, how did they do this in 2004? This would have blown my mind in 2004. So when audiences are like, this is one of the most amazing movies, and they have that memory, that nostalgia for it, I totally get it, because I don't have any nostalgia for this movie whatsoever. So it's not my number one off of like, it was amazing 20 years ago. It's amazing today in 2021. It is fun. It's funny. It's emotional. First of all, Holly Hunter is just great. We need more of her in life in general. Craig T. Nelson, fantastic. They seem like real people. Even the kids, they all seem like real people. The only thing that would maybe tip it and go, I don't like that, is Jack. But what they do, if this movie had done the easy thing, which is continuously cut back to him destroying the house and having powers and being wacky, we get a series of voicemails all in a row in one little scene, but we're not cutting back to it. I think if we had left the main story and kept cutting back to gags with this baby, I would have hated this movie.
What they did is there is a short called Jack Attack, which is exactly what you just said. So they kept all of the Jack stuff of him freaking out the babysitter, and they made that into like a 5-minute short, and it was on the DVD, and so it's on Disney Plus. So people that want that, it's there, and I think it works pulled out of this context anyway. And they developed the Jack thing more in the second one. You get like a fight with him and a raccoon and things like that. He gets his powers. in the sequel. So they get there, but I think, they use it just enough here where you get like hints of that.
By not showing us and then showing us all of it at the end, I think is a better payoff. And it's almost like a little coda to the movie as opposed to, just like another animated feature would have done what I just said. They would have kept cutting back to the house getting destroyed and the baby slapstick and kids would have laughed their butts off and they would have loved it and but it wouldn't have aged well. And this is a movie where it's aged perfectly because it was made masterfully and is like every right decision you could make for this particular movie, they made it. I don't have normally, like, I'm a structure guy, I'm a writing nerd, I'm like, this doesn't make sense and this should have been here and that should have been introduced in the first. I got nothing. I got no notes on this movie. I got, like, if I was in the studio, I'd be like, no notes. Like, I got nothing. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with this movie.
No. I mean, I agree. I have
the perfect length
about how great it is.
It's not 5 minutes too late or too short. It's not 5 minutes too long. Just about the time you're like, okay, I'm about done. It's like, okay, that's the end then. And you're like, whoa, okay.
I know that obviously Disney owns Marvel Studios and there's therefore the entire MCU. This is the best superhero movie Disney's ever produced.
Yes.
I think I'm confident in saying that.
I would agree with you.
This is better than everything Marvel Studios has made thus far. There are some that are great and that are not as far away from this maybe as some of the more recent ones or some of the other the lesser MCU entries are. But this is by far better than anything in the MCU, better than anything certainly in the DCEU.
Or Sony.
I think it's in contention still for one of the best superhero movies ever made.
When I was done,
it's up there for sure.
It's one of you're exactly right. It's one of the greatest superhero movies ever made, and considering that they're fake superheroes, they're just made up. All of them are made up, but you know what I mean. They're just like They're just
not based on source material.
Yeah, there's no source material here. I think this is way up there, and I think of the movies of the superhero movies last 20 years. Okay, modern superhero movies. I think it's between this and probably Into the Spider-Verse. And I think this maybe beat Spider-Verse, and I would have to say I think Spider-Verse is maybe one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think this might beat this.
Yeah, and those two are animated, which I don't know what that says about comic books. Just work better as animation in some respects.
I think I think you're 100% right. I think I've long held this opinion. I think there's certain characters and certain storylines that just work better in an animated world. So they just do. Because there's less of a suspension of disbelief. And at that point, you're not thinking about the real world implications and the physics of it all and the this and that. Like, there's less of a hurdle to get over.
You don't have wonky CG.
Yes.
Like, if you go back now, I love the original Spider-Man movie, but boy, anytime he's swinging around and stuff, jeez. Yeah, the rubber people thing that a lot of the early 2000s superhero movies has. But yeah, this is by far, a perfect superhero movie. It works as a perfect spy movie. Like we said, it's very Bondy in a lot of ways.
It's a perfect family movie.
And a family, it works. There's legit family drama in this movie. This Mr. Incredible, as we said, Craig T. Nelson and Holly Hunter and Sam Jackson and Jason Lee, like all of these performances are amazing. Mr. Incredible is essentially going through a midlife crisis during this movie.
Yep.
He's, and it's all about, if you want to use it as kind of allegorical, the superhero work is like him kind of redefining and finding himself at this point in his life.
Yeah.
And there's implications of their marriage that they're struggling. She thinks he's cheating on her. Like, this is a movie for children, and yet I feel like as a 38-year-old man, I relate to it more now than I did when I saw it when I was 20, or than my daughter does watching it now. For kids, it works as just like a fun superhero movie, but if you're watching it as an adult, you're like, oh man, this family needs to get their stuff together. Like, you feel that conflict. And it feels, like you said, they feel like real people. It's a real relationship between the two of them. An equal relationship, I should add, too.
Yeah.
And it feels like a real family dynamic. There's tension in that household. It's not, Pixar makes a lot of movies, most of the ones on this list, that are about family. And I feel like this kind of embodies that theme in a very different way, but equally as effective as Coco does.
Yeah. I think there's a worse version of this movie where Mr. Incredible Craig T. Nelson is the big, dumb, bumbling husband.
Right.
And Holly Hunter is the perfect wife and mother. And they have an inkling of that. But she also screams at her children. She loses her temper. She gets, she's not that perfect mom with the dumb dad. And dad isn't dumb. Dad's unhappy with himself. And he's not dumb, though. And we with the working at the insurance company, we see that he's caring. He's a deeply caring person when he's helping that old woman. He's like, you didn't hear this from me, but and so he's not an insensitive brute, right? And she's got to bring out the love in him because she's the sensitive, perfect wife. No, she loses her temper. She screams. She has fears, insecurities. He's at times the more reasonable one, the more level-headed one. At times, she's the more level-headed one. They complement each other.
Yes, exactly.
And he loves her. He truly loves his kids. He's distracted, but it's all in a very like human way because he is going through this midlife crisis, and ultimately, it's him wanting to be able to like not just regain his glory days because that's kind of what they even make you think it's about. And it's kind of about that, but when she confronts him on that, he's like, it's not about that, really. Yeah, that's part of it. But what it's really about is basically he wants to feel like he's good enough to deserve his family.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what he does not working at
and that's
dead end job. He doesn't feel worthy enough to come home and be like the dad and husband he needs to be. He doesn't feel worthy of them.
Because he doesn't have that outlet. He can't be himself. And that's a theme that runs through everything. Violet's scared of being seen.
Yep.
Dash has to hold back, can't compete in sports. So he has to like, his outlet is putting tax on his teacher's seat and getting caught on video, but not getting caught on video.
Yeah. And Elastigirl is made to be a spy and a fighter pilot and all this sort of stuff. And she's vacuuming.
Right.
Yeah.
She has to kind of hold it together. In addition to her feeling the same as her husband, she has to kind of be the glue and keep everyone on the same page.
Yep.
And it's just, you get that scene, one of the more emotional scenes in this movie, kind of touching on what you were saying about Mr. Incredible, is where he's captured and he's being held up.
Yeah.
And he thinks that they just shot down his entire family.
His children.
And that's kind of, his children, his wife, like he thinks that, he thinks that they're all dead. And so you have that like emotional low, that desperation that he turns to. You have this is again a movie for children in which the movie implies that their intimacy has returned at one point.
Yes.
Like
visually. Yeah.
That which again, for a kids movie, they thread it nicely where nothing is like super overt about that. Where the mother is telling her kids, listen, these people are not like the characters you saw on TV. These people will kill you.
They don't care that you're kids.
So if anything happens, you run.
Yeah.
And so this movie is playing by the rules of a superhero movie, of a like 1960s spy movie, but also at points subverting that and modernizing it and subverting it. We have Edna Mode, who has a whole thing about no capes.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen these other stories. Look what happened.
Yeah.
No capes. And she kind of cuts through all the BS.
That's almost some like Alan Moore Watchmen level stuff, right?
I wrote Watchmen down.
Yeah.
There's Watchmen level stuff here.
Yeah.
There's a whole anti-superhero law that happens.
Yeah.
It's also kind of True Lies, but for families, where he has to sneak out.
That's exactly right. I had that too, especially with the whole affair thing. I was like, there's a whole True Lies. It feels True Lies-ish there. Yeah, 100%.
But none of it feels derivative.
Nope.
All of it works.
Yep.
We already mentioned Edna Mode. I love that character.
Yeah.
And they use her just enough. If they had played their Edna Mode card, it would have been like, okay, I get it. She's very abrupt.
And the person who does the voice of that is Brad Bird, right?
It is.
Because
it is.
Allegedly, he couldn't find anybody to do exactly what he wanted to do, and so finally his own crew got sick of him. Like, no, that's not it. That's not right. They're like, well, you do it yourself. So he did it himself.
And it's a fan favorite character.
Yeah.
And I think the Michael Giacchino score in this is so listenable.
Yeah.
I think some of this, all the music in all 5 of these movies is great, but I think some of them don't work as well to listen on their own.
Yes.
You can I put this on while I'm writing before, and it's very jazzy and upbeat.
Yeah.
And
It's got a 60s feel
beautiful.
to it. It's almost like,
oh, so good.
It's like
amazing.
James Bond meets Ocean's 11, kind of a jazz feel to it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And then, I think that the fact that this movie is so great is a testament to that the Brad Bird movies that he's written and directed for Pixar are the closest Pixar has gotten to like a real auteur coming into their midst, because a lot of their people, Lee Unkrich, who did Coco, and Andrew Stanton and Pete Docter and John Lasseter, who, who's now got a whole other issue with him.
Yeah.
But all of those guys are Pixar guys. Brad Bird is a filmmaker who works with Pixar. It's not exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's not part of the in-house Pixar team who kind of works his way up. He made Iron Giant, and then he made this for them, and then Ratatouille, which is another great movie, and Incredibles 2, and then, we talked about Tomorrowland briefly. So, I mean, the fact that he has that sort of outside perspective, he doesn't necessarily feel like he has to play by whatever the Pixar rules are, and he can kind of do his own thing. And you can feel that Disney and Pixar just said, hey, you made the Iron Giant. That's a great movie. You go do your thing, and we'll interfere as little as possible. And it doesn't feel like a movie that has a lot of hands in the mix.
Yeah.
It feels like one person telling a singular story and executing that vision.
Iron Giant is just, I've seen it one time in my life, and it's one of those things I never want to watch it again, because it was such an amazing, I just loved everything about the movie, and it was so amazing. And Vin Diesel got me to cry by just saying Superman. And I never want to go back, because I'm afraid that if I go back, I don't like it as much, it will ruin that memory. So I will never watch it again, because it's perfect in my mind. And now here's where I think we're getting at, right? You're a hardcore Pixar guy. You've been following the journey in real time all the way through for the most part. I've intermittently kind of dipped in and out. If one looked good, I'd go see it or watch it, or if I heard a lot of good things about it. But a lot of them I've skipped, or whatever. Or I watched them and I was like, yeah, it's fine. I'm ambivalent towards it. The low tier Pixar, everyone's like, those aren't very good, or those are like softer Pixar. I haven't seen any of them. The fact that I'm coming at this with no nostalgia, having just seen it just hours ago or days ago, and you're coming at it, I assume you probably saw it fairly close to when it was released.
Yeah, no, I saw this I've seen most of, I've seen almost all the Pixar movies in theaters. I have, because I've just moved into this house not long ago.
Yeah.
I have a Toy Story lithograph from the Disney store from 1996 sitting over there that I'm like, do I want to put this in one of my kids' rooms? Where am I going with this?
Yeah.
So I've seen the vast majority of these in theaters.
You got to build a
And to
YouTube
your
set
point,
around that lithograph, by the way, with nothing but toys and
right, there
knickknacks
you go.
behind you for the cricket table.
To your point, like even I haven't seen Cars 2 or 3 all the way through. I saw the first one and I was like, no, I'm fine.
And I'm
It's
also
only going to get worse from here.
I'm also not a parent, and so that motivates, I know, a lot
Right.
of older people, because it's just this stuff eventually makes it to Disney Plus, and your kids watch it 10 times a day. So I don't have a need to watch these things. So for me to say, coming in as a blank slate, having only seen the end of Incredibles, and to come at it now after 20 years almost of big budget cinematic superhero movies, MCU, and go back and be like, this is better than all of it. Like, I love Infinity War. Like, Infinity War, I think, is infinitely rewatchable for me. And I'm not like even the world's biggest MCU guy. I got a lot of problems with those movies, and you've all heard about them for hours. But for me to come back around and be like agree with you and be like, this is not nostalgia speaking. This is just my experience of it. The script is just on a completely different level than what Marvel's been giving you for the most part. Like, I would just agree. I don't think a modern superhero movie, maybe outside of Into the Spider-Verse, has come close to the writing and characterization and simplicity and tightness of Incredibles. There's no filler. There's no fat. There's nothing that needs to be trimmed. There's nothing that's like, oh, that didn't need to be in there, or doesn't meander. There's no meandering. There's no second act problems. This movie goes from strength to strength to strength to strength. It's a damn near perfect film, if not perfect.
It's so well paced, like
Perfectly
we were saying.
paced,
And then you get to the third act where it's he's captured and she has to infiltrate, and then they get out, and then they have to fight on the island, and and Dash is running across the water, and then him and Violet are together, and
Fantastic.
and it's like then they get off the island, they have to make it to the mainland, and they fight the machines in the city, and Frozone joins them, and it's like it's like that. I know you're a wrestling guy. It's that whole Vince McMahon meme where you're like smirking, and then at the end you're just like, oh. It's this third act is exactly that. You're like, wow, then that happened, then the end you're just like, this is the best thing I've ever seen.
It's what popular entertainment is supposed
exactly
to be.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
It's 4-quadrant popular entertainment where anybody of any age, gender, race, identity can sit down and watch this and care about it because it has good story, good characterization, good themes, emotional resonance. It looks good. It's paced well. It's fun. It's funny. It's sad. It has some thrills and chills. You clap, you cry, and you go home happy. And that's what this level of entertainment is supposed to be. Yeah, I think that Pixar has been a very good steward of storytelling. And so where is crowd-pleasing, popular entertainment, high quality, high concept, plus good storytelling? It's been in the hands of Pixar for the last 20 years, 25, 30 years, actually. It was, as we're getting there, they're almost 30 years.
Yeah,
and
almost.
Maybe they're going to give up the throne here. Maybe they're on a little bit of a slump, but
it's also they're making bold family entertainment, bold, creative, idea-rich family entertainment that is not. It's not. I mean, look at all the other animated stuff out there. It's Trolls, it's Minions,
Sing 2,
whatever. Yeah. Sing 2, Despicable Me 1, 2, 3,
right.
Whatever. It's all like the exact opposite of what we've been saying for the past like almost 2 hours. Like it's pop culture references to Twitter in a family animated movie. It's fart jokes. It's very frenetic and you know lots of noises, fast colors, keep kids interested, and not a whole lot else. Yeah. The story is basically soulless in a lot of respects, and yet the team at Pixar have been doing the opposite of that. They've been doing those kinds of bold, innovative stories that are not afraid to shy away from, hey, you know what? This fish, he's got all these kids and his wife, they're all dead. That's where we're starting from. This little girl, she's got a lot of emotional, tumultuous stuff going on inside of her. Let's see what happens with that. You know, these people, they're all fat, just sitting around in the future, and that's where human race is headed. This is what, we just talked about Coco, a whole movie about death. Yeah. The whole movie's about death. Look at all these dead people. We should remember them. Yep. Otherwise, they're going to literally fade from existence, not even as a spirit, be able to. And then this film is about, you know what? Being middle-aged and having kids and a wife and a household and also having your own personal ambitions. It's hard to balance all that. And so you try it, whether you have superpowers or not. Yeah. I can vouch for that. So these are all very relatable movies that are not afraid to be real about certain storylines and certain themes and certain character motivations. And, they don't placate to children. I think that's been, I was on Nostalgia Cast with Darren Lundberg and Johnny over there. And we talked about An American Tail. And that was kind of I went on a whole little tangent about like, kids are not stupid. You can teach them about these things through the prism of it's a fish, it's a robot, it's a toy, and they'll understand. They won't be bored by it. You can challenge them a little bit. And I think these movies, in addition to being,
I think it also helps a child develop emotional maturation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. In addition to being 4-quadrant entertainment, you can do all that at the same time. Yeah. You don't have to choose but one or the other. And I think that's kind of the thesis statement of why I picked these 5 movies is that these 5 movies all pass in both respects. You watch them as a kid, you like, the cute little turtles swimming around talking like a surfer, or the robot and the hanging around on Earth with a roach, whatever. Yeah. And then when you get older, you're like, oh man, that's what it feels like to be a father, or to have a kid, or to be a kid, or to be a person in the world trying to make a positive difference. Like, you have that scene that we mentioned earlier with Mr. Incredible, where he's dealing with his boss and he's seeing someone being mugged outside, and he knows he has the power to stop it, but he's powerless to act, and he feels powerless in his life. And I think that all that is not the kind of thing that kids are familiar with. So introduce them to it through through animated film. I think it's a great medium through which to teach them those kinds of lessons.
Coming at number 5, Finding Nemo. Coming at number 4, Inside Out, which was kind of a surprise for both of us. Coming at number 3 was Wall-E. Coming at number 2, another surprise, Coco. And then coming at number 1, huge surprise for me, Incredibles. So it just turns out that the rest of the world was right. I was wrong. And I wasn't so much wrong as I didn't really have an opinion. But I'm thankful that we did this. I'm thankful for the folks who sponsored the episode. And mostly I'm thankful for you, Robert, because I don't know that I would have watched them in a cluster like this. You know, I've seen some of these and maybe I would have gotten around to seeing all of them. But watching them together, it kind of like filled in a gap of, oh, that's what happened to movies in my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it just, it made the tapestry make a little bit more sense and the landscape make a little bit more sense. So I'm really appreciative. I think you picked 5 perfect films. Like we said at the top, these are all good movies. Some have different flaws than others. A couple of them have the exact same flaw, the bottom 3. But you can't go wrong with any of them, and you all probably already know that. If you are listening to this and you're like, I'm not really an animated person, well, thank you for sticking with us this long. I am not anti-animation. It's just not my go-to per se. When it's really well done, I really like it. I respond to it. And so maybe give some of these a shot. I would say at the very least, you haven't seen Incredibles, maybe you missed it, or Coco, those two. Give those two a shot for sure. And then if you don't like them, only tweet at Robert Yaniz Jr. at Crooked Table on Twitter. Where can we find you, man? What do you got going on in 2022? And I know you're just had a kid not that long ago, another one.
Yep.
You had a big move not that long ago, and you decided to completely and utterly relaunch from a single podcaster to basically your self-sustained podcast ecosystem with very many different iterations of shows.
Well, right now I have the 2 shows that are running at the moment. Close Watch with Robert Yaniz Jr., where we get to know our guests through the movies they love. So normally that's a different guest every episode, and we'll talk about usually a movie that's important to them and delve into that film and their connection to it, that kind of thing. And then Franchise Detours, where in 2022 we're doing Mad Max. We're doing, speaking of superhero entertainment, we're doing the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. We're doing the Muppet movies, the theatrical Muppet movies, and then later in the year, the Dark Knight trilogy, the Planet of the Apes films, and then I think I'm planning on doing the Pirates of the Caribbean movie. So a lot of those early mid-2000s movies we'll be touching on that show, and you can find all of those on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, other podcatchers, as well as crookedtable.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Crooked Table.
Yeah, Robert's a great guy. He's just as nice and pleasant as you could ever want in somebody in the cynical world of movies and movie podcasting. So definitely give him a follow. I've definitely noticed a decline in his activity on Twitter now that the second kid's been born. So this is what that means. What it means is when he's tweeting, it's really important to him, and he's not just shilling constantly content for you, because otherwise he has a real life. So that's who you want to follow. You want to follow people on Twitter who have real lives. Don't follow people who just tweet the tweet.
Even it threw me off so much having a new kid and moving that the end of 2021 I did a 12 days of Crooked Table just because I had episodes banked that I hadn't posted because I wasn't really as active as I should have been. So I was like, you know what? I got to clear the decks. Get these episodes out in the world and start 2022 fresh and stick to a schedule this time and try and work ahead a little bit. And so that's what I did. So people can check out they'll see episodes posted every day in like the lead up to the holiday season.
So I've been doing a backlog of Robert Yaniz Jr. content out there. If you enjoy his raspy, soothing voice as much as I do, then make sure you subscribe and listen to his content. He's not only that, he usually has some pretty good guests, and he's helped me actually find some guests. He's one of the people I've hit up and said, "Hey, man, do you know anybody who could do this?" And he's always recommended people, and I think we're gonna have a few of the people you recommended on here in 2022. Awesome. So I'm always appreciative of you behind the scenes, man. You're a good guy. You're a pal, and Now Spotify has a 5-star option. Please leave him 5 stars on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. So,
well, thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me on again. and having me on for an experimental format. I think that was kind of fun to sort of figure out how to do this kind of on the fly and set up in a definitive list. I'm surprised actually that our lists were so close. I mean, we had a 3 and 4 flip flop kind of deal, and that's about it. Like everything else was was in line, and I think that's a testament.
Yeah, our movie taste is divergent, right? So we have some crossover, but there's a lot of stuff that you're like, "Hi, that was okay," and I'm like, "That was really good." And there's a lot of stuff you're like, "I love that." I'm like, "That stunk." So we're not similar in our we're not so similar in our taste that it was a foregone conclusion that we'd have the same lists. So I think with that,
exactly, and
I think we've actually created a definitive list, is what I'm saying.
And us, like you mentioned, us coming from totally the opposite ends of the spectrum. You seeing Incredibles for the first time, me owning it on DVD for almost 20 years. So it's like a big difference. And we both were like, nope, these are the 5 best. This is the order they're in. We have spoken, internet. And so I think it says a lot that we were, we're not both like, I grew up with this. Me too.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
It's this testament to the strength of the film. So it was fun to talk about these movies and to do it in this format. And was this experience, like, are you going to do this kind of format going forward with sponsored episodes? Like, what is your plan for that?
I don't know. I think if somebody else wants to sponsor an episode, they could, of course, always go to bingemovies.podbean.com and hit sponsor an episode button. You'll see an option where you can either do a deep dive on a single movie that we haven't previously covered or a ranking episode of some type. I always try to do something different for the sponsored episodes than just a standard episode, unless that's what somebody wants, right? Pin me, pay me.
Right.
I keep the customers happy. So if somebody's like, I just want you to do what you do normally, just with these movies or this theme or whatever, I'll definitely do that. But I always try to do something different and distinct to make it different. So it's really going to depend on getting feedback from listeners. If you can hit us up at on Twitter at Binge Movies and say, I like this format, or I thought it was terrible. This was the worst episode you ever put out. Then I'll never do it again.
Don't ever have Robert back on again.
It wouldn't be you; it'd be the format, because you're good, man, and people love you here, so they like when you're on, and so it's just really going to depend on whether or not people like the format or not. There's really no format. It's just a casual conversation, but attempting in real time to rank it. It's almost like a behind the scenes of how myself and our guests come up with these lists, really. So
I
think it worked. I wish I could trademark a gimmick, but I can't.
Because this time we were pretty close. So I can't imagine how long, and we're still at almost 2 hours. Like, I can't imagine how long this episode would be if you and I had completely opposite lists. Would it be like 12 Angry Men style? We're going to stay here until we hash this out. And then you release the first ever 14-hour podcast episode.
If anybody can release a 14-hour podcast, you're looking at it.
You see my wife over here bringing me a pot of coffee. I'm like, I got to keep going. I'm fighting for the integrity of The Incredibles.
Yeah, if anybody can talk for 14 hours about movies, it's definitely me. You would tap out after a while because you have a real life. I am
at a certain point, I'd be like, I don't care that much. I got my kids need me. I gotta go.
Yeah, I'm a childless degenerate, and all I have in my life is movies. So that's all I've got. Well, this is fun, Robert. I hope to have you back on in 2022. And
absolutely,
anything I could do to support your show, I'm always happy to. So, it's always great to see you, man. And listeners, tell us, did you like this more loosey goosey, real time? Let's figure it out on the fly as we go format. Should we do it again? Is it worth trying again? Or you're like, that stunk, don't ever do it again? Let me know on Twitter. And until next time, binge on.